Welcome to Legacy Therapy, the podcast that will teach you, in bite-sized chunks, how to leave a stress-free legacy so loved ones can focus on people, not paperwork, when you become ill or pass away. Here is your host and financial advocate, Stacy Golden-Lisnock.
So you were saying that people are just really now starting to plan more than you've seen in the
ever
past?
before. Yes. I mean, I think, finally, unfortunately, with the tragic death of Kobe and COVID this year, people are realizing that, we don't have control over everything in our lives and that it's extremely important to get this done. And they just don't realize, like with everything you do, the amount of decisions that have to be made, the options that are available. And you really, if you can make these choices when you're of sound mind with no emotional attachments or less emotional attachments, it's much better.
Yeah. And when you're making the decisions too, I think because you only work with the pre-need side of it, right? You're not working with the people that are all panicked because they have to make a decision like today.
Totally. And actually, most of the time, that's exactly what the conversation stems for with the clients is, I don't know how, because if it's a couple or if it's one person and then they know that it would have maybe been their child or a good friend or a brother or sister, they're like, I don't know how these people would have made this decision, after I passed. Like they've come back 2 or 3 times to go through the process, understand their choices, make their decisions. They're like, they would have been making these decisions, under a time frame. So it's a lot different, very challenging. Yeah.
Wow. So what are you finding people are doing mostly these days? Picking.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's so fun. It's so personal. I think that's the one thing I love about what I do. It's so personal. The only thing that is truly true is that once someone finds their final resting place and they choose that, 95% of those people take a picture. It can be a burial plot that might to someone else look exactly like the one next to it or the one next to it, but it can be a bench that can house 4 cremated remains for a family. It can be a mausoleum above ground. It could be a niche in a wall. It doesn't matter what it is. They almost always take a picture with it because it's the sense of comfort of knowing that they know where their final resting place is. They're proud of the choice that they've made, that they've gone through this process and they've made the decision. And it really is giving them peace of mind, knowing where they will be, and giving their loved ones peace of mind, knowing that they know exactly where they wanted to be, that they made those choices. So I love helping people just because of all the differences. So I would say in the past, I would probably say with the clients we help are probably 50% burial, 50% cremation remain placement. But
Yeah, and some of the research I was doing, they were saying that it's tending more to the cremation side now because people are more conscientious about the green thing where, running out of space and all this kind of other things. So, and the cost, of course, and they just feel like they don't want. Sometimes my mom's thing was even though it wasn't our religion to do it, she just did it because she said, you know what, I don't want anybody to be, have that obligation to come visit, the gravesite. So she didn't want that for us. And, that was fine. That was her decision. But my sister, the oldest sister, she was very disturbed by that. She's like, but nobody asked me and I want to go. I want to go have the, it's like, so
it's so, and that's what I love about it. It is so personal, and that's why it's right for the person to make the choices, but we do encourage them that people have a conversation with their loved ones because we do get that quite a bit that, we don't want people to be obligated to come and visit us. And most people say it's not an obligation. And it's almost, in some cases, for some people like your sister, it's almost a relief, right? It's like, it's a place I go, I have my conversation, I pay my respects, I, get through those emotions, and then I leave and I know mom is there in a safe place. So it's so different. It's so personal. Reminds me a little bit about pregnancy. Everybody has advice for you about parenting. Everybody has advice for you about how to handle your final arrangements. And you're like, I think I'll just do this myself. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, that's good that you have that personality where you have the patience for that, right? And so everybody has their process that they go through. And so are some people just like real quick on the trigger, like they don't want to be there too long, like, okay, let's do this, it's done. And then other people sort of mosey around and like almost like they're window shopping in a way. It's like, I don't know how this feels. I want to try this one on. I want to try that one on. Is there that whole...
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think it's a couple of things, when you're dealing, if there is a couple involved, a husband and wife, then you can have some interesting dynamics because they may not want the same thing. One may want cremation, one may want burial, one may want a service, one may not. So, you have that dynamic of, okay, who's more interested in doing this? And oftentimes, I'll be honest, it's the women. The women are more practical. The women are thinking that, statistically, they may be the one left to handle all of these arrangements. So they're like, we've made so many decisions together in life already. I don't want to make this decision on my own. I want your input. So it's navigating how comfortable people are with having the conversation. I do think there's a portion of, people in this world, and I'm sure, you've seen it too, that will just not pre-plan. They just won't make these arrangements. They just cannot have that conversation. Luckily, I think it's a small portion, but there is a portion that, for whatever personal reasons, whether it's experience, whether it's a superstition, whatever it is, they're not going to make those arrangements. But for the rest of us, I think I know it's a wonderful conversation. It's a blessing for their loved ones. It's a blessing for themselves, and it's giving them that time. So it's really seeing, what's the comfort level. When both parties, or even when the one party, I have helped many single people, and when they find what they like, you just see it. So I think to your point of originally, like, or some people come and they just leave. I think they're more actually assuming that there's no health concern. They're actually find it very interesting because they've never looked at it from this perspective before. They may have helped a loved one or done some arrangements for someone under time. Most people have really never spent some time really evaluating what's important to them and their options. And we talk about all those other parts too, sort of the ethical will, the legacy. What are the other things? Like, you need to have these in place, but what are the soft things? What do you want to pass on? What do you want to enjoy now? So I think it almost reaffirms living in a weird way for them. So we have great conversations. So most of the time they're not running away.
Yeah, I could see that, where it's like, it could make you appreciate your life when you can see where, it's going to end at some point. We know that for a fact. So once you have that sort of taken care of, then you have the freedom to like live to the fullest, because if that was a concern of yours, it's taken care of, and it feels like it's this big burden off of you. If you've wanted to do it and you just never get around to it because it's just not something you're like, oh, today I get to go, funeral shopping or whatever. It's like, how does one, that's kind of interesting though. Like, how does one finally decide today's the day that I'm going to do this? And they have to be, how do you get your customers to book appointments and things like that? What happens? How does that work?
I think there's a lot of different ways it comes to people. I think one, it can be, a family member passes away or a friend passes away. It could be a mom or a dad or a sibling or a friend who just greatly impacts them, and they realize, either they were involved or peripherally involved, or they start to realize, wow, I want to make sure my loved ones are taken care of and that it's easier for them, or that if someone planned well, wow, that was great and that was easy. Mm-hmm. We also work with a lot of financial planners and trust attorneys. So as you know, when you're doing some of this paperwork, it is actually typically part of trust paperwork, just where they sort of say, well, you should write down your wants. But, we spend some time educating estate planners that it's not just about writing down your wants. That's really not going to, for some people, that may be enough. But for many, the right thing to do is actually investigate and put these plans in place. So it comes through that aspect as well. So people that they tend to do planning with. And then clergy. Every religion has sort of its relationship, its traditions with the passing of life. And so we do get quite a bit of referrals from different members of clergy, because they are dealing with this milestone as well. So it really our clients come from a variety. And then I'll tell you, one of our best sources, as you can imagine, is past clients. They go home unintentionally and tell, their friends and their loved ones, what they've done. And after they get the question, are you okay? Is everything all right? And they, oh, no, I'm fine. Thank goodness, there's no issues, but I wanted to plan this. Then they tell them, about the process. And we're actually just, helping a family now. We did the first sister and her husband, and she has 3 sisters, but only 2 that live locally. The second sister has now come, and they are going to all, sort of purchase their final resting places next to each other. So, the nieces and nephews and children will come and be able to pay respects to a whole group. So it's kind of a neat experience.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. That's that whole I'm doing it and it's so great. I want to share the experience because it's really lifting me up to a place where I have the it just releases something, right? It's like it's a freedom that you get all of a sudden.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what, when people finish your plan, that's probably that experience as well. You're going to get a lot of referrals through that experience because they're going to say, oh, I now have everything that I was worried about in place. Mm-hmm. And it really does, knowing that that's taken care of does sort of move that stress off your plate. It allows you to then live, right? Mm-hmm. To make those arrangements.
Yeah.
Have fun.
It's a big one and you only have to do it once. So, you're not having to keep revisit it. Some of the other things that we do, you do have to revisit because things change, people come and go, so to speak, like, when you're talking about beneficiaries and things like this, but when you're talking about, you're basically buying some kind of real estate in a way, right? Mm-hmm. You're investing in something.
So there's, and just, there are a couple of situations. So there are 2 parts, right? So the one part is the final resting place. The other part is the mortuary or the funeral service and everything involved there. And there really are 2 separate entities. But I love your idea. You don't have to revisit it. We live in such a unique world that sometimes, a loved one passes away and maybe it's a couple and someone gets remarried. And so we have a lot of blended families and different situations which do come to us. And it's really beautiful to kind of see how we work through some of their concerns and their questions. And, we just helped a lovely couple who've been together a long time, but the gentleman's first wife passed away. And typically what happens when a first wife passes away, if they had kids together, he purchased the plot next to his wife and that was his intent. And then years later, he remarried and now he's been, married for probably 20 years plus. And, now his second wife is making the choice of, okay, so how do we do this? So it's really, it's quite sweet when we can help a family come together and find something that they're happy with.
Yeah. So what happens when somebody buys and then they move out of the state or they just decide that wasn't what it is? There's a secondary market for some of this stuff, I think, right?
So there's a couple different options, yes. So the first part for us with Dignity, we do have 2,500 locations across the country, and we have what's called national transferability. So if someone does move away, we do have the ability for them to transfer those. In fact, I just helped a family last year who purchased here, and then they actually moved to 2 families. One moved to San Diego. So I actually, because it was driving distance, drove down and we helped them transfer those arrangements there and make some differences. And then one family who moved to Atlanta and everything was transferred to Atlanta. So you do have that ability. There is a secondary market. It's a bit challenging only because there's different financing involved and different things that we offer that, like in the secondary market, you don't get national transferability. You probably wouldn't get financing, things like that. Depending on the length of time in the cemetery where you own space, mm-hmm. there is possibility for that, but it's a little bit more challenging. I think when I work with my clients, I do typically tell them, listen, life changes. We don't know in 10 years I always say your favorite daughter moves to I don't know. I don't want to be, to some other part of the country that you may not have been as excited about before. Yeah. But you got to follow the favorite child there. Yeah. And so, buying now, in fact, the couple I just helped as well, if you're 90% sure, if you're 80% sure you're going to be here, you're buying this for that experience, for use. But if life does happen, there are options of how to handle it. Even donation. We have quite a few folks who've donated because the value just isn't there for them to resell, but they can take a tax write-off. So there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah. Wow. That's pretty cool. All right. So your Dignity Memorial.
Dignity Memorial. Yeah. So in Orange County, there's 8 mortuaries, which deal with helping families with the deceased after they pass away. And then there's 4 cemeteries, which is the final resting place. So I don't know if you know Pacific View in Corona del Mar, Harbor Lawn Mount Olive in Costa Mesa, Fairhaven in Santa Ana, which is kind of a historic memorial park, and then Westminster in the city of Westminster.
That's that big one on beach?
It is.
Yeah.
Yes. And then they're all so beautiful, and they all have their own character. It's amazing. It really sort of their unique personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. That is cool. And you work with your dad in the business too. How did that come about? That's pretty interesting.
I do. I'm so fortunate. You know, he was the first one in, and he really actually helped in our community for no form of pay. It was sort of his philanthropy and just what he sort of became knowledgeable about for about 30 years. He'd always be the one helping someone. If someone passed away, he would work with them at the cemetery and help get things arranged and do all this stuff. And he just was sort of the person they called. And then about 5 years ago, he was negotiating with the cemetery, and he had sold his business. He had been consulting, but he really wasn't working too much. And he's the kind of person, unfortunately, didn't have any, hobbies. Work was his hobby. So he needed to stay working. So he went to the cemetery afterwards, and he asked the sales manager if he could have a job. He was 76 years old, and they said yes. So he was hired. And then about 2.5 years ago, he said, well, why don't you come join me? And I thought, no, thanks. That doesn't sound very good to me. And he said, no, come on a couple of calls with me and see what I do. And I did. And honestly, I haven't looked back. I truly feel like it's almost a calling. It's such a passion to just help people. I love working on the pre-planning side because we don't have that time constraint most of the time. We do deal with a few terminally ill families, and that is very challenging. But for the most part, 85% of our clients are healthy, and we have no time constraints, and we're working through all their questions and giving them options. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great. That's great. All right. Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of that. That's really nice. So I just, my beta class just is being announced. It's starting Tuesday. So it's interesting. Some of the comments that I'm getting back from people, they're like, oh, thank you so much for thinking of me, but I'm just too busy right now. Everybody's too busy. They're too busy right now. Like there's so much going on. They're so busy. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And then we don't have the luxury.
But I can watch it on record too.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah,
I'm like, I can't make all of those dates and times, but if I can watch it later and comment, that'll work.
Yeah. So it's like, and that was the thing, like, oh, I can't, I'm so busy. So, so speaking like to that part of it, it's like, I've had a few things happen to me where it's like, you think you're invincible, you think you're all healthy, and you think everything's great until you're not, right? I got heat stroke once when I was young. I mean, I was in my 30s. I was in Palm Springs and at an event. It was like 122 degrees, and I had just a whole combination of things. And then I got heat stroke, and the heat stroke was to the point where I felt like everything was just shutting down. Like I felt like
probably was.
I felt like my throat started closing in, everything started draining, and luckily I wasn't by myself, but I was driving, and I had to pull over. I barely made it to the side before I felt like I really faint. And so I was able to get to a place, and that was a scary situation. And that lingered with me for years, that it was almost like, I guess it was an anxiety thing where if I had any caffeine, it would reappear. And I didn't realize at first what was causing that, but I noticed that it was if I had a caffeinated drink or whatever. So I got off of caffeine altogether for several years. Because when I used to order at Starbucks decaf and this and that. One time I remember driving, I was drinking the Starbucks, and I was on the freeway and I'm drinking the Starbucks, and all of a sudden I started feeling that same feeling, and I'm like, roll down the window, and I'm like, it's like, I had my husband was, I go, talk to me, because it's like all you can think of is this, I'm going to pass out. It's like, anyway, so that was one, but I've had several other things happen to me that have been like, wow, I wished I had more stuff in place, because this might be it. Cause I don't, I don't know, like, and the scariest one was an anxiety attack where I really thought that I was dying. Like, and there wasn't, I wanted to say stuff and I wanted to like give information that I thought was important. Like, I don't have enough money in the account right now to cover the mortgage. It's going to bounce. I mean, different things like that. Cause I move, I have my system that I do and nobody else knows what it is.
And they're going to freeze it.
Yeah. So I know there's situations. And then the thing is, once you're past that scary part, you think, oh, I'm fine again. I'm good. I got lots of years. I'm young still. And it really isn't anything about your age, as we see from Kobe, and somebody who's successful and has money and has the life. And you would think, they have everything to live for. In fact, he just had a baby, right? He had an infant baby.
Right. Who is not named in the trust.
Yeah. So, but somebody did tell me that the way the trust was written, that it is covered because it's of all children of the marriage or something. No,
I don't think so. That's not what I heard. I think they've gone back to court to include the child, but I think they actually specifically named children because they were more. So to your point, the problem was it wasn't drafted by an estate attorney. Apparently it was drafted by a different attorney who was more concerned with illegitimate children.
Yeah.
So we'll name the children, but it should have been all children of the marriage, to your point, between these two.
Right.
And so I haven't checked recently, but as of 2 months ago, they were going back to court. She was going into court to see if she could get the baby included.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So it's like, it doesn't, I mean, again, don't use me as the expert for that, do some research.
Yeah.
But it's really, these are technical things. And we didn't do ours until my son was in his early teens, because we didn't know who we wanted. We couldn't figure out who we wanted to leave the child to. That's not a solution. We actually knew who we wanted young and we knew who we wanted old, and it was two different family members. But what we should have done and how we should have been counseled is go do this one, and then you'll amend it when they reach the age that you want to change it. But we didn't. I mean, thank God, we're okay. And now we have it in place, and he's going to be 18. So it's not going to, the guardianship isn't going to matter as much. But, it's to your point. We all live on a thread. We just don't realize we live on a thread. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a cousin who, I don't know, he was telling me one day he's going to be, when he's 120 and this and that. And I was laughing. He got so mad at me. Like how could he was serious. And I thought he was kidding. He's going to live to 120. I'm like, okay.
I really think there's a percentage of people, and you and I both, are going to run into them.
Yeah.
Will not deal with this. There's and I would say it's a low percentage, but maybe it's 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. 2 out of 10 is a big percentage. 1 out of 10 is a decent percentage too, but I do think it's at least that can't have this conversation, that they either think it's superstitious,
yes,
or they just cannot have the conversation about their own death. They just can't. And you know what? I actually think it's okay. I think they have to recognize that they can't. If someone else can plan for them, that would be fantastic. I mean, I think from a financial standpoint, they still have to put some things in place, which they can,
Yeah, I mean, life insurance, if they had some life insurance, but the people sometimes, I've been in life insurance since I was like 19 years old or something. And so I've been in a long time, and it has changed over the years. But I mean, in the earlier years where people weren't as experienced in life, really, because you really look at it, right?
Mhm.
The people that had experience are now gone. The people that didn't are now experienced, right? So they've seen life come and go now where they hadn't seen it at that particular time in their life. But I used to hear it all the time. Like if they planned for it, it was going to somehow happen, like this was going to be like a precursor to the event. And I'm like, that is just like, in my mind, it just doesn't happen like that, because I think if that were true, then all your other things that you harp on or think about or plan would have happened too. And you're still working on those, right? Like, you want this boat or this house, or you want to be rich, or you want to go on this vacation, or you want to have kids, whatever it is.
And if I wrote it down and I planned for it, then if the same thing's true with all of those things, 100%.
Yeah,
But I don't think logic is falling into that.
No,
But
absolutely.
I agree with you. I always say that if I had the power to do that, then I would be doing something else.
Yeah. What were you doing before? Before you got in this?
So I actually out of college, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for 10 years.
Oh,
and then I actually worked in the financial planning industry for 10 years.
Oh, you did?
Not as a financial planner, just in operations, but it was such great exposure to insurance and trusts and investments to an extent, for sure. But, just rules and, just the differences, IRA, 401k, but the importance of having a trust in place, the importance of having the right type of life insurance in place, long-term care, just, life skills. I feel like it was life skills, which I think prepared me really well for this. So I'm happy about that.
Absolutely. It's right in line. And when you were talking, so the trilogy that I have, because I've done, a financial advisor for 33 years or something. I got my CFP in the 80s, in the 87, I think I got it. I've been in this industry forever because it's just been my thing. I'm just all about planning, and I just love the teaching part of it. I thought, I should have been a teacher. Well, that's what I'm doing now, really. So I have this online course. And so I thought, okay, if something happens to somebody now, today, they either become ill, they can't handle their own affairs. This Alzheimer's is huge. They say, what is it? 1 in 3 or something are going to have Alzheimer's. It's very, very prevalent. And people don't realize once you've lost the capacity to recall things, and you're not able to help in your own situation, right? Because you don't know sometimes even who you are. So how are you going to know what your affairs are and what your passwords are, and what investments you have, or where you have your safe deposit box? Or if you don't have any of this stuff told to somebody else, and sometimes things just get lost forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, these later generations and stuff, and even probably my generation, don't have the patience for nonsense and to keep on going back. Like, I'm very persistent. Like, I will follow the trail till I get to the thing, to whatever end, for the most part. Most people don't have that kind of patience, and they'll just give up and say, screw it, I don't care, whatever. It could be $1 million, it could be $12. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Right? Like, they're not gonna mess with it. They got things to do. They got a movie to watch or something. But they got to go to dinner. They got dinner.
I just had this conversation with someone. They're young. They're like in their late 40s, 48-year-old couple. And we just had this conversation. And I was like, the generation before us, as we're walking through the cemetery, that generation planned. Like, they understood that before they took a vacation, they needed to have this in place. And before they did all these things that were sort of luxurious in their minds, right? Mm-hmm. And they were. They are luxuries, they are privileges.
Yeah.
They had sort of their insurance in place, and they had their, bills paid, and they had maybe their final arrangements, and, all those kind of door-to-door salesmen that we used to, like the vacuum cleaner used to come to the door.
Yeah.
So did the people selling mortuary and cemetery services. Yeah. They used to come to the door, and they used to have the conversation. And so then people would plan and have these arrangements made. Yeah. But our generation and younger, they're, to your point, it's like, I can find everything out on the internet. I'd rather plan a vacation than really organize my life. Yeah. And it's like, okay, I get it, but
I know
this is extremely important.
That's my thing. So I decided on a trilogy because I'm like, okay, the first one is emergency info file. It just kept coming to me, emergency info file. What would somebody need to know if you got hit by a truck today? If you got, COVID today and you're on an intubation, what does somebody need to know today to go in and make sure that things get taken care of? Your pets and your bills and your whatever. You've got appointments scheduled, and you've got clients. How would somebody know how to get into your calendar and call your clients that you've got appointments scheduled with that are going to be waiting for you, on that meeting, whatever. It's like you just don't show, you're a no-show, right? I don't know. That concerns me. Maybe it doesn't concern too many other people. but anyway, so okay, so I had to keep reeling myself back when I'm doing this course design, because as a financial advisor, I want you to have all the right stuff, all the right investments, all the right insurance, and I kept saying, no, we're not doing that in this course. It's what do you have now? I don't care if it's the wrong stuff, but what is it that you do have? Because we're going to need to go through and close things out or pay things off or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. The next one, once they get through that, is called a deep dive. And now that's looking at, what do you have? Do you have the right type of insurance policy? So many people don't know what they have insurance. They have no clue what kind of insurance they have. And all they say, and I've had people, but it's life insurance. Yeah, it is life insurance, but it's only if you die, in these 10 years, or only if you have this. When people buy accident insurance, a lot of them don't get that they have to actually die of an accident within a certain number of days. Come on. Christopher Reeves, he died of that accident 7 years later, or whatever it was. That accident insurance coverage didn't cover that, guaranteed, because the longest I've seen is 365 days, which is really not even the norm. Most of them, you have to die within, I think, 90 days of the accident or something. And just like when you apply for Social Security disability, you almost always get an automatic decline, right? That's what I've heard. Same thing with this life insurance. When it's accidental death, it's almost always, unless you can, it's a hard, fast, you died in this accident. Even a car accident, you could have had a heart attack, which caused you to have the accident. You could have had an embolism. You could have had something else that actually was the cause of the fact that you died, but the fact that you had the car. Because I had somebody that was under chemo treatments. This was a story that I heard. Didn't have the actual thing, but the mom of this lady that I was talking to, her mother died. She had a chemo treatment. She was very weak. She stood up to walk, whatever. She fell, hit her head on the mantle of the fireplace, and died. Now, is that an accident? Or is that the fault of the chemo treatment that made her dizzy so she fell? It's like, these are things. And I'll tell you what, most people won't fight the insurance company over a death claim. They feel that is just taboo. It's death money, and they're just not gonna fight for the money, right? It has a weird thing, right? So I tell people, look, life insurance, when you die, no matter how, is the type of insurance you want to have. You want to just not make sure that they're going to say, well, how did you die? Right. So, but anyway, so that's the life insurance.
I heard a great thing from not an attorney, and it was about being an ambulance chaser. And I was like, someone said to me, I should go to hospitals and talk to people. And I was like, I'm not going to be an ambulance chaser. That's awful. I don't want to do that. And this gentleman, who is not an attorney, he's like, came up with the term ambulance chaser. It's like the insurance companies, because they want you to not go, file these claims and have, continue down this path, right? So again, not to your point that you should go have frivolous lawsuits, but when something is logical and something that makes sense, then he corrected me and he said, I don't think you should use that word. I thought, okay, I've learned something. It's a different perspective, it's a different perspective of what are you, and you do buy insurance and you have an understanding of insurance, but I promise you the insurance companies have a better understanding of insurance than you do.
You know what? You don't understand. You don't even know until you put in the claim what could happen. Now, the ones that actually go very smooth, the way that you expect them to, I think that's the norm, and that's really what we expect. But there are some that just one hoop after the other. And I think that part of like what I put into the course too is like, making sure that you have the correct beneficiaries, and then looking at your contract to see that you have everything in there correctly, because you could have your birth date wrong, you could have your Social Security transposed, or you could have some small little things that will cause months back and forth. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Totally agree with you. Yeah. And people are doing this, if they're not doing it in a plan like you have ahead of time, then they're doing this oftentimes in, a state of chaos. And that's when they're going to make even more mistakes. 100%. Yeah. They want to have these conversations, but they aren't seeking them out. So oftentimes, like, that's what, when we're talking to families and estate attorneys and, financial advisors, I'm like, your clients are having these conversations. They just don't know who to have them with, or they're having them in their head, or they're having them with each other, but they haven't realized that there are people to have these conversations with, so I agree with you. I think that people aren't seeking it out. If it's presented to them and they understand, they're like, oh, I know I've been thinking about this, or I hadn't, didn't know how to go about it. But if you can help them go about it, it definitely, they see the value. I mean, I don't think, with the exception of that person that can't handle it, most people do see the value, and they understand that it's only going to alleviate the same decisions having to be made later on during chaos, with maybe a worse setup financially, from a tax perspective, a legal perspective, an emotional perspective, everything.
That's why I did the Legacy Therapy podcast too, is to kind of bring to light some things, some stories, so people can get the exposure if they haven't personally had any of it in their own life, which is good and bad, right? Like, if you've had a bad situation, you're most likely to not want to repeat that for your own family. But if you've had no experience or a fairly good experience, then you just kind of don't realize what goes into it to get ready. Yeah. I kind of look at it like when you're going on a vacation. Have you ever done that, where you get real organized and you have your list, and you do it weeks ahead of time, and then you'll, in the middle of the night or sometime, or you're doing something, and you put it on the list. The other on, you don't do a list. The night before, the morning of, when you're leaving, you throw stuff in the bag, and you ultimately forgot something that you have to then go buy or have sent to you because you can't buy it, like your pills or something like that. I had this one time, it's like, I can't remember who it was. They had to have their pills overnighted to them because they forgot them. They left them on the counter.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a great analogy. I actually use this very similar analogy. I say the trust is the trip. Putting together this trust is the trip for everybody, for your family, and you've arranged where they might go to eat and what tours they may take, which could be the tax, advantages, and how you've titled assets and things like that. And we are the airline tickets. So you get to the airport, great, where you're going, but nobody purchased the airline tickets. So all of a sudden you're now running around. You're going to get there. You're going to get to your destination, but it's going to take you longer. It's going to cost you more. And you're going to be irritated. So I'm like, why wouldn't you start? We always decide the destination first. Got it. Get the destination done. Do the trust. Do all that important paperwork, that advanced healthcare, all that stuff. And then buy the airline tickets.
Thank you for listening to the Legacy Therapy Podcast. If we hit it out of the park today and you learned at least one new thing to take action on in your own quest to planning the best legacy possible, then be sure to tell your friends, subscribe, and rate and review wherever you get your podcast. The show notes will provide the sites and information that were discussed today. You can get more great tips, resources, and inspiration by visiting our website, legacytherapypodcast.com.